Another high school story. Ask anyone in the school. I'll wait. But you could save yourself the trouble because they would probably all tell you the exact same thing. Jake Reynolds had it all. And they would be right because I am Jake Reynolds, and I do indeed have it all. You see, I was born with the perfect blend of athleticism and intelligence. And if you took a quick survey, you'd find out that there aren't many people inside or outside Pierce Morgan High who would not want to be me if given the chance. I figured out high school my first year and completely dominated it. By the second year, Pierce Morgan High became my domain, and I was its undisputed ruler. But like all rulers and men in positions of power, I started to feel a little lonely on my throne. I began to feel like something was missing. No, that's not quite right. It began to feel like I was stuck in a rut. Like there was always part of me that was longing for something more, and I wasn't sure how I would find or fulfill it. But that raised several questions in my head. Questions that threatened the persona I had so delicately crafted since late middle school. Weren't my near-perfect grades enough? Or my sports standings and scholarships? Did they not count for anything? I found myself doubting the core values I had built my entire high school on. No, there was no way that this was the case. They were more than enough. They had to be. Flashback 1 week ago. I remember the day my world came crashing down. It was a sunny Friday afternoon, and I was walking down the alleyway with Cassie. She was a head cheerleader, blonde, beautiful, and popular. Everyone thought we were the perfect power couple. And so did I, until that day. Cassie had just asked me if I was ready to take on Westside with the rest of the team, and I assured her that it was something I could do in my sleep. But then, I saw him. He was standing by his locker, idly reading a book without a single care in the world. He had curly gray hair that fell over his eyes, and glasses that framed his crystal blue pupils. He wore a simple white t-shirt and a black hoodie, while his backpack lazily hung out of his locker. This stranger looked different from everybody else, and not just because he was new, he looked interesting. Looking up from his book, our eyes met, and for a brief moment I'm frozen in shock, as if I felt a jolt of electricity run through me. Who was he? What was he reading? What was he thinking? What was he like? Like the rest of the student body who smiled at me when I walked through the halls, this guy's face morphed into a frown directed at me before slamming his locker shut and walking away. Our eyes had met for a few seconds, and he walked away as though I was some loser working up the courage to bother him. I wanted to talk to him, to get to know him. I suddenly found myself wanting to know what made him tick. Before Cassie could talk me out of it, I turned around and ran towards the retreating guy. I didn't know it then, but it was our Icarus moment. Breaking into a light jog, I chased after him, calling out to get his attention, but I got no reply whatsoever. Could he not hear that? That Jake Reynolds was chasing after him? How rude. Hey, I called out, lightly jogging to catch up with the dude, but he didn't even glance in my way. So I grabbed his arm gently and say, "Hey, slow down a little. I've been calling after you." He turns, and for a second our eyes lock again. And it's like before, only this time it's a freaking lightning bolt that hits me, and I can't explain it. The new kid hissed at me in frustration. "Leave me the hell alone, Reynolds." And just like that, he walked away, leaving me with a head full of questions and a burning sensation in my gut. 2 weeks later. The days dragged on without a sign of him. Thanks to some of the gossip that usually came my way, found out his name was Arnie. Eventually, 2 weeks had passed since the strange encounter, and I found myself constantly thinking about the elusive stranger who had blown me off. Lost in my thoughts, I took my usual seat in AP English. Cassie, as expected, planted a routine morning kiss on my cheek. "Morning, babe," I mumbled, but it was more of a reflex than a genuine sentiment. It wasn't until she took her seat on my left that I noticed someone on my right, but before I could acknowledge the intruder in my space, Cassie's voice rang out, cutting through the air like an unwelcome alarm. "What's this loser doing here? You can't sit next to Jake, you creep." I turned my attention to the right, and there he was, the stranger from a few weeks ago, cool as a cucumber, pretending Cassie didn't exist. "Hey, I'm talking to you, weirdo," Cassie continued, her annoyance escalating. "You seriously think you can just sit here next to Jake?" Arnie finally glanced her way, his expression unyielding. "I didn't realize the seats were reserved," he replied casually, turning his attention back to whatever book he had in his hands. By now, the attention of the entire class was on the unfolding drama. I could feel the eyes on us, and before Cassie could escalate things further, Mr. Lutaro, the English teacher, walked in. "All right, settle down everyone, get your textbooks out. We're continuing with Shakespeare today. Mr. Lutaro announced, oblivious to the tension in the room. 45 minutes later. The bell mercifully rang, signaling the end of Mr. Lutaro's exhaustive lecture on Shakespeare. Just when I thought the ordeal was over, Mr. Lutaro, with his perpetual enthusiasm, announced our next assignment. Your task, my brilliant scholars, is to pen a paper on what innovation could improve modern-day soccer. I want creativity, originality, and of course, impeccable grammar. This is due in 1 week. As Mr. Lutaro began pairing us up for the assignment, Cassie, of course, made a fuss. No way I am working with someone random. I demand to be paired with my boyfriend, Jake. I tried to defuse the situation, but Mr. Lutaro, bless his soul, had a different plan. He walked up to my seat and announced, Jake and Cassie always pair up for projects. This time the honor goes to Arnie. Cassie's eyes widened as she opened her mouth to protest, but Mr. Lutaro raised a stern hand. All pairings are final. It's a chance for everyone to work with someone they might not usually choose. Arnie, clearly displeased, sputtered out, there must be some mistake. But Mr. Lutaro wasn't having it. No mistakes, Mr. Mitchell. I believe you and Reynolds can bring some interesting perspectives together. Now let me finish the pairings. Arnie didn't wait. He slammed his book shut and rushed out of class. I quickly placated Mr. Lutaro before he got mad at him. Don't worry, Mr. Lutaro. I'll find him and make sure he's okay. I dashed out of class and into the empty hallway after Arnie's retreating form. Yo man, wait up, I called out. My pace quickened to catch up with him. My hand instinctively reached out and grabbed his shoulder to halt him. We both stood there, chests heaving, a charged silence hanging between us. His clear blue eyes seemed to draw me in, and slowly, the distance between us began to disappear. But just as the tension reached its peak, Cassie's voice shattered the moment. Jake, what's taking you so long? I turned, expecting to see her there, but she wasn't. It was almost a relief because I had no idea how to explain the compromising situation I was in with him. The following weekend, Arnie was able to somehow find my number and get a message across to me. I received a text from him the next day with his address attached. I tried striking a conversation with him via text, but he pretty much ignored all of my messages and gifts. The nerve of that guy. Despite his apparent ghosting, I still decided to come to his house today. Our AP English scores were at stake. Plus, I had to admit I was very curious about Arnie, and I would take any opportunity I had to peek a little deeper into his life. On arrival, I pushed the doorbell in place, and no sooner than a minute after, I heard very heavy footsteps approaching. The door swung open, and behind it was a man who could only be Arnie's father, a strong Norse-looking figure with a commanding presence. He asked, "What do you want?" I quickly replied, "I'm here to see Arnie." Without a word, he jutted his thumb over his shoulder, signaling me to proceed. Go straight down the hall and take the last left. As I followed his instructions, the house felt like a labyrinth, but the instructions were crystal clear. Finally, I reached the last left, and there he was, in his bedroom. Arnie seemingly immersed in something on his desk. "Hey," I greeted, unsure of how to break the ice. Arnie glanced up, surprise flickering in his eyes before he masked it, with his usual composure. "You made it," he said, his tone neutral. "Yeah, your address wasn't that hard to find," I replied, attempting a light-hearted comment. The room fell into an awkward silence as Arnie returned his focus to his desk. I walked into his bedroom. The football posters on his wall immediately drew my attention. The moment he caught me staring, he pointed towards the bed and said, "I've already done the assignment. You can put your name on the packet and leave." I approached the bed, glancing down at the binder he indicated. To my surprise, the paper was not only completed, but meticulously done. It was as if he had read my mind and anticipated my thoughts and ideas on innovating the sport. I stammered and asked him, You finished it already?" Arnie shrugged, his gaze fixed on his desk. "Didn't see the point in dragging it out. It's there. Put your name on it, and we're good." I skimmed through the pages, and it was evident that he hadn't just completed it. He had put thought and effort into every detail. The realization hit me that Arnie was very much enamored with football. I scribbled my name on the assignment and muttered a quick thanks. But I still had to ask, "You're a big football fan, aren't you?" "If you're done, you can leave. I've got other things to do." For one moment, I contemplated leaving, but then I got a hold of myself. Arnie and I had almost kissed in the hallway, and now he was going to brush it off like it never happened? No way, I wouldn't allow it. I liked him, sure, but I wouldn't allow something like this to slide so easily. Wait, I liked him? When did that happen? Before I could gather my thoughts, Arnie's voice cut through the tension, breaking the silence. "You doing okay there, big guy?" My response carried more venom than I intended. "I don't know. I don't freaking know. Why don't you tell me?" Arnie remained unfazed, as if my reaction was exactly what he expected. I don't think there's anything I can tell you that you don't know already. You're the king of Pierce Morgan, after all. I snapped at the mention of our high school. Stop with the king crap. Arnie's voice took on a steelier tone. Why should I? Isn't that all you ever wanted? To be king? I paused for a moment, caught off guard. What do you mean? You dreamed about this, Jake, since middle school, he asserted, leaving me speechless. How did you know that? Before I could demand an explanation, he produced a photo. A snapshot from my middle school days. In the picture, there was me and a boy with cropped blonde hair. Eustace, my middle school best friend and almost boyfriend. The name escaped my lips in a whisper. Eustace. How do you know Eustace? I asked, my voice trembling. Arnie took off his glasses, sweeping his hair back in a motion that felt eerily familiar. Holding it in place, he revealed a face I hadn't seen in years. It was Eustace, just a little bit older. I asked a question at the tip of my tongue. How? Eustace, how are you here? He replied with frustration evident in his words. I moved back at the start of high school, Jake. Imagine my surprise when the person I love had built up a fake life and couldn't even recognize me anymore. As he let his hair down, the familiarity of his faded but didn't quite go away. It was as though I was looking at Arnie and Eustace all at once. And the truth was that I was. The weight of guilt settled in my chest and I tried to shrink the blame. You could have tried to talk to me. You didn't have to become an entirely different person. Arnie wasn't having any of it, and he voiced his displeasure. That's rich coming from you. I didn't change my identity or anything of the sorts. My hair just grew out, and I got glasses. He turned away from me. I tried talking to you several times, but your stupid posse wouldn't let me, and you would stand by and just watch. I felt a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach. The pieces of the puzzle fell into place, and the picture painted was one of missed chances and unspoken feelings. The weight of my own ignorance pressed down on me, and I muttered, I didn't know. He looked a little sad and said, Yeah, that's the point, wasn't it? You didn't know, and you didn't care enough to find out. The room suddenly felt suffocating, and I found it hard to breathe. Still, Arnie didn't stop there. He said, Even despite all of this, I couldn't stop myself from falling further in love with you. I tried to kill the feeling, Jake, but your face is everywhere around school. On banners, posters, and flyers. It's pretty hard to ignore. Not thinking about the repercussions, not thinking about anything but the emotions welling up inside me, I stepped forward and closed a distance between us. I felt his shock as he went rigid, but eventually he melted into the kiss. It was brief but intense, lasting only 5 seconds before Arnie angrily shoved me away. He angrily yelled at me, This is the problem. You think you can have whoever you want, whenever you want. It's just not true, Jake. Stop being delusional. You're not the king. High school will never come and go like it never happened, like you have nothing to show for it, except for shallow relationship, plastic medals, and a stupid mindset. His words hit like a punch to the gut, and I was still reeling when he screamed, Get out. Get the hell out of my house now, Jake. I wasn't going to back down. No, I'm not leaving. Not until we sort this out. The deep voice of Arnie's father called out to us from down the hall. Are you boys okay? Arnie quickly wiped his eyes and replied before the larger man decided to take matters into his own hand and check in on us. Yes, Dad. We're fine. Nothing to worry about over here. He looked back at me and hissed. Look, Jake, I'm trying to get over you. Been doing pretty well so far, so don't come and mess this up again. Please. Arnie kept wiping at his eyes, but he couldn't stop the tears entirely. I turned back to his bed and sat on it. After you left, I was lost, Arnie. I didn't just lose my best friend. I lost the person I had spent the entirety of middle school falling in love with. You're the only reason I didn't swap schools. All of the bullying couldn't really get to me as long as you were there. Somehow you made things a lot easier by just being there. Arnie snorted in disbelief and sat on his desk, looking me dead in the eye. He said, But all of that didn't stop you from forgetting about me. I raised my voice just a little higher. You don't get to play the victim here, Arnie. You told me that you loved me on the day and next you fucking disappear? How did you think I felt about that? No notes, no calls, no texts. Arnie ran his hand through his hair, and for one brief second I see Eustace again. I didn't want to leave. I don't interrupt. I sensed he was about to drop really heavy stuff and needed some time. Arnie took a calming breath and continued. When my dad told me we were leaving, I fought it. I didn't want to leave you and our dreams behind. But my mom had been diagnosed with cancer. We had to move closer to the specialist hospital that she was being treated in. My heart drops at the mention of his mom. I remembered her. She was the nicest woman you would ever met. Dude, I'm so sorry, I had no... Arnie held up a hand, stopping me before I could inquire any further. We lost her a few months after moving, but I had just been enrolled into another middle school, and I couldn't just up and leave. My hands sank into hair. I couldn't imagine what he must have felt. I cleared my throat and finished for him. And then you came back to town and I can't even recognize you. I'm so sorry, Arnie. I get up and walk towards him, stopping just within a few inches of him. We've both made mistakes, and we've suffered from them. There's no reason for us to keep suffering. We have a rare opportunity to set things right. Might not be exactly the same as when we were kids, but this could be even better. Arnie chuckled a dry, humorless laugh. You know, your relentless optimism is one of the reasons we get along famously. You're like a badly written main character. I didn't let him get the last word in, and your practicality and logical reasoning was why I fell in love with you in the first place. Arnie went stiff at the mention of love. He pushed his glasses a little further up to hide the blush on his cheeks before speaking. I don't hate you, Jake, or dislike you. I just felt I had to be angry at you for leaving me behind. I carefully placed a hand on his shoulder. All of that doesn't matter anymore. Let's start over. Arnie gave me an incredulous look. Like, forget all of our past and pretend? I shrugged. Yeah, it should be easy enough, seeing as how we're completely different people now. Arnie seemed to bounce the idea around his head for a few seconds before mirroring my shrug. You know what? To hell with it. Let's give it a shot. I stretched out my hand to him. Hi there, I'm Jake Reynolds, Pierce Morgan's royalty. It's nice to meet your acquaintance. Arnie stifled a laugh before shaking my hands in his. The pleasure's all mine, your highness. Arnie Eustace Mitchell at your service. We both broke out into laughter, and I pulled him into a tight hug, relishing this familiar scent. Thank you so much, man. This means a lot to me. Arnie scoffed. It was a little long overdue. 1 week later. Arnie was without a doubt the missing piece. The following week, after the confrontation in his home, we had begun to slowly hang out again. It started with lunch at the cafeteria. I walked in and found Arnie by his lonesome as usual, chewing on his beef stick and reading Shakespeare. I joined him without thinking too much about it. Sharing lunch with him felt very natural. It was like we were back in middle school all over again. Only this time, nobody could touch us. See, way back in middle school, Arnie and myself were bullied a lot. And in our free time, we would daydream about how we would conquer high school and rewrite our stories. Arnie was with me every step of the way, and it was only natural I began to develop strong feelings for him. Imagine my surprise all those years ago, when he professed his love to me at the end of school one afternoon. He was never shy or scared about what he felt. Sadly, that bravery never rubbed off on me, not even a little. I never got the opportunity to reciprocate his feelings or come out, because I was too frightened by what others would think. And to make matters worse, his family moved out of town the day after he confessed to me, and I never saw him again. So I made up my mind to maximize our time together. I didn't want to rush Arnie to impose my feelings on him, so I decided to take things slow. We would walk home from school together, catching up on each other's lives. I even got him to tell me why he went with the name Arnie. Surprisingly enough, it was his middle name. With names like Arnie and Eustace, I joked that his parents were setting him up to be bullied, and he agreed. By Friday, Arnie and I had fallen into a new rhythm. We were completely comfortable with each other's presence, and I even found myself pining for him when he wasn't around. The entire school buzzed with gossip when photos of I and Arnie holding hands began to spread. I couldn't even remember when that happened. Arnie and I had almost been everywhere together this past week, and yes, there were times when we got a little carried away with the hand-holding and the small hugs here and there. But I wouldn't change a thing. This was the happiest I had been in a very long time, and I did not particularly care what anyone had to say about it. Not even Cassie. Understandably, she was mad about the recent development between Arnie and myself. So the first thing I did by Friday morning was officially break things off with her. Our relationship was a sham and she knew it. Cassie had always known I was gay, but she promised to keep it a secret as long as she could ride my coattails all the way through high school. She didn't take the breakup well. She had cried and threatened to expose my sexuality to the entire school. She thought that would be enough to get me back in line, but it wasn't. I wanted nothing more than to make things right with Arnie, and if it meant finally coming out of the closet, then so be it. I told her, I really don't care about all of this anymore, so rat me out if you want. But we're done. I didn't bother waiting for whatever hysterical reply she was going to give. I left her by herself and continued down the hall deep in thought. Despite being the resident queen bee, Cassie was a sweetheart. Like Arnie and me, She had been bullied, but on an even grander scale. She knew what it was like to be at the bottom of the barrel, so that's why I was certain that she wouldn't cause any trouble, for I or Arnie. And the words she yelled to me as I left was all the proof I needed. "Tell 'em all that I dumped your ass, Jake." I threw a wave over my shoulder. "That works for me, Cass. Thank you." 7 hours later. It was the last period, with 20 minutes left before the final bell. I decided that today would be the day I finally went all out and told Arnie how I felt. Sure, you could argue and say it's just been 5 days, but these last 5 days have been some of the best I've ever experienced, and I didn't want it to stop. The last time I felt this way, Arnie ended up moving away, and I didn't want to leave anything to chance. Not again. I shot Arnie a text and told him to meet me in the gym in 5 minutes. I had set up a little surprise, and nothing overly grand. Just some flowers and poetry that I had written him. I would brave my heart to him today, like he had done all those years ago. As I rounded the corner to the hall that led to the gym, the loud voice of Mr. Hoffner and the PE teacher rang out. He barked at me. "Reynolds, what do you think you're doing?" His eyes bore into mine, and for a moment I thought he had figured out my plan. He didn't waste any time with pleasantries. "Follow me to my office, now." As we stepped into his office, Mr. Hoffner gestured toward the seat, and I quickly took it. Before I could utter a single word of apology, he silenced me with a firm hand and began to speak. "Jake, you're undeniably the brightest sports star this school's witnessed in years," he began, his voice tinged with evident pride. "I've had the privilege of guiding you on this journey so far. Your leadership, both on and off the field, has been instrumental in fostering a spirit of camaraderie and excellence within the school." With that, he retrieved a letter from his desk drawer and handed it to me. His eyes bore into mine as he continued. "A football club in the United Kingdom is interested in signing you to their academy on a semi-professional contract. It's a significant opportunity, but here's the catch. They don't have much time. If you agree, you'll have to leave as soon as tomorrow." Mr. Hoffner leaned back in his chair and spoke with measured tone. "Go home, Jake. Talk it over with your parents. If they agree, get back to me as soon as you can." He gestured towards the door, signaling the end of our conversation. I nodded, still trying to wrap my head around the unexpected turn of events. Leaving his office, I made my way down the corridor, my mind abuzz with the magnitude of the decision that awaited me. As I stepped into the hallway, a collision brought me to an abrupt halt. I hadn't even seen him there, but I had knocked him to the ground. The bouquet of flowers I had hand-picked for him, and the envelope with the poem I had written all came crashing down. I quickly apologized. "I'm so sorry, Arnie. I didn't see you there." Arnie regained his footing, brushing off the collision with a nonchalant smile. "Don't worry about it," he said, and in that moment, I realized he had been seeking me out. "I didn't see you at the gym, but I did in fact see what you left me." He blushed a little, and I felt my heart do a small flip. Arnie explained that some students had pointed him in this direction. I told him how I had ended up here. Mr. Hoffner busted me before I could make it in. Arnie nodded. "This is really thoughtful, Jake. I didn't know you had it in you." I held my hand over my chest, feigning hurt. "Oh, I'll have you know I'm as romantic as they come." Arnie chuckled, but didn't quite reach his eyes. I had to ask him, "What's the matter?" Arnie took a whiff of the flowers and stopped himself from swooning. "This is really beautiful, Jake. I've had dreams start off like these. But I don't want to come in between you and Cassie." I reassured him. I'd broken up with Cassie, and I watched his eyes widen. "It wasn't a real relationship," I explained. "Just for appearances." Taking a step closer, I found the courage to apologize sincerely. "I'm sorry for everything. I want nothing more than for you and me to work out." Arnie's response was a shy smile, and he asked, "Can I kiss you?" I eagerly replied, "Yes, please." We met each other halfway, our lips meeting each other after what felt like ages. But the weight of the letter pressured on my conscience, and I knew there was something crucial we needed to discuss. As I began explaining the contents of the letter, the semi-professional contract, and the opportunity it presented, a sad smile appeared on Arnie's face. He took a moment before responding. "It's a great opportunity, Jake. I'm genuinely glad you're attracting the kind of opportunities you deserve." I wrapped him tight in a hug and whispered in his ears. I told him, "Say the word, and I'll rip this letter to shreds." He tightened the hug and shook his head. He replied, "I know that I just got you back and all, but that would be too selfish." I choked back a sob. "I'm so sorry, Arnie." He rubbed soothing circles onto my back. "We've got a few hours left. We make the best out of it." I wiped away the tears that was building at the base of my eyes. What do you have in mind? Later that night, I didn't think Arnie had it in him. I swear it felt like I was orchestrating a scene straight out of a movie. The guy had this idea for a stargazing night on his roof, and boy did he nail it. First off, picture this. Twinkling fairy lights strung across the edge of the roof, casting a warm glow against the darkness. Arnie, being the thoughtful guy he is, had laid out his spread of snacks. Talking about the good stuff. A mix of sweet and salty delights that could satisfy any craving. There were chocolates, chips, you name it. It was like a mini feast under the stars. We settled in. The breeze played with our hair as we snuggled up, gazing at the stars like it was the most natural thing in the world. As we indulged in the snacks, Arnie's idea of stargazing fuel, apparently, the conversation flowed effortlessly. We talked about everything from dreams and aspirations to those quirky little things you'd only share with someone special. It was one of the nights where time seemed to stretch, and every shared laugh and secret felt like a stolen moment. I told him, for the longest times now, I felt I'd been missing something. Like there was some itch I couldn't quite scratch. But ever since you came back into my life, you effortlessly filled that hole, and it sucks that I have to leave you again. Arnie shrugged. I don't know about a hole, but these last few days have been amazing for me. All the anger and resentment that I thought I harbored for you is all gone, and I feel way lighter. Arnie turned to me, his eyes reflecting the soft glow of the moon, and whispered, I don't care how long it takes, as long as you come back to me, Jake. The kiss that followed me was like nothing I'd ever felt before. It was sweet and tender, like a promise sealed under the cosmic expanse. With a taste of chocolate and the warmth of his lips, I felt like I couldn't do otherwise, even if I tried. Conclusion. The next day, Jake hopped on a plane bound for the UK. The prospect of being apart from Arnie for another year loomed. But like Arnie said, distance couldn't dampen their connection. They became experts in the arts of texting and late-night calls, bridging the gap that Miles sought to create. Then a twist in the tale. Arnie hustled, snagged a scholarship, and landed himself in the UK for a specialized writing program. He and Jake were finally reunited, and from there on, they tackled high school, college, and whatever life threw at them, side by side. As Jake and Arnie navigate their past, present, and uncertain future, what aspect of their journey resonates with you the most? Feel free to share your reflections on the complexities of love, self-discovery, and the unexpected twists in their story in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to become part of our Rainbow Force and stay wholesome.